deeper into your brain that can intercept your sensory signals and process them, perhaps. So, imagine if it's a device, it could be something kind of kludgy like an implant, but it could also be nanobots. I mean, you're probably familiar with that concept as well. It could be devices that little nanoscopic devices that you've snorted up or something. They've gotten into your neural complex, and they can be intercepting the signals and network together. They can pass those signals to potentially a central computer, and that computer could say, oh, well, this person now is looking in the mirror, so instead of sending them the imagery that makes them realize they're looking at themselves, I'm going to send them the imagery of a chimpanzee, and as you're looking in the mirror, you think you're looking at a chimpanzee. You raise your hand to your face to feel your smooth face, and the nanobots transfer that information back to the host computer, which has the ability to determine what you're trying to do, and says, well, he's trying to feel his face now, so what we're going to do is make that sense feel more like monkey hair. And so all of your senses theoretically could be completely fooled into thinking that you're a chimpanzee.
Right. And obviously this opens up some very scary doors, so to speak.
Absolutely.
I mean, one question is, of course, how do we know that this already hasn't occurred? I mean, what we have been talking about so far is kind of what we are, currently developing, what we see in the years ahead coming, and because of that we can do that now, we can kind of potentially perceive that what if the case might be that actually a civilization either previous to ours, or that we actually are somewhere else, or whatnot, but let's say that they themselves actually developed a simulation, if you will, a world to enter into, and that we simply are born into it right now. I mean, how can we know that?
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about it, you realize that we really can't know. For example, the technologies that we were just discussing, those same technologies could be used to erase memories.
Right.
They're making a lot of headway these days into understanding how we remember things. It has to do with, the release of glutamates, of chemicals at the synapse level that reinforce the strength of those synapses. Well, theoretically, nanobots could do that. Nanobots could destroy certain synapses, or they could build them up.
I mean, that's actually around today. If you think about it, monosodium glutamate is one of those, and that's actually only a chemical. So imagine what you can do with a nanobot going in there.
Absolutely, yeah, sure. So I guess what I'm saying is that, if this technology is possible, then it's certainly feasible to say that, you could imagine a situation where your memory could be temporarily erased. You could be presented with a reality that's different than the one that you knew before. And you could even, if this were sort of a friendly scenario, you could say, let me experience that reality for an hour or a couple hours and then restore my memory to what it was prior to that. And, I can, and there are a lot of futurists and people like Ray Kurzweil who believe in the possibility of uploading and downloading memory banks at some point in the future, and not that far into the future either. So all this seems to be, 20, 30 years out there. And like you said, how do we know that it's not already going on? And
right.
I think that's really the core of the argument that Nick Bostrom talks about with his simulation argument.
Tell us about that a little bit then.
Sure, and that's to me that's just a very interesting kind of logical argument, and basically it goes like this: we've talked about the possibility that we'll get to that point, to the point where we can create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality. He refers to that as post-humanism, and refers to the simulations as ancestor simulations. So he identifies three possibilities. One, we will destroy ourselves before we get there. and that's certainly a pessimistic point of view. Two, we will not get to that point because we'll consciously decide not to pursue that avenue of inquiry.
Right.
And I don't know about you, Henrik, but I kind of feel like you can throw out that option. Like, when have we ever been faced with a technology that was interesting to pursue and not pursued it to the hilt?
Exactly. Yeah, I think you're right there.
So then the third option is that we do get to that point, but when we get to that point, we will generate millions of these ancestor simulations, excuse me, and therefore, if there are millions of ancestor simulations generated, the odds that we're living in one of those millions of ancestor simulations is far greater than the odds that we happen to be living in the one 30 years prior to it, and just thinking about it. So in his argument, the optimistic point of view is that we're almost certainly living in a simulation. The pessimistic point of view is that we will destroy ourselves. So that's kind of a kind of an interesting, certainly an interesting argument to think about.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I mean, are there any kind of, let's say like this, if we are in a simulation right now, are there hints, so to speak, lying around that we are in a simulation? Are there Easter eggs in the program, so to speak?
Yeah, I think there are, and we can probably spend the whole rest of the program talking about those. And I'm sure we've all experienced, things that just seemed inexplicable. I had an experience when I was in high school where I got up one day and just walked across the room, picked up the telephone, and said, "Hello, Bill." And my friend Bill was on the other end of the line, and the phone had never rung. And what prompted me to do that, I have no idea what it was. I only did that one time in my life, and it wasn't like I heard, just the tail end of a ring, because the time it took for me to walk across the room was longer than it takes between rings of a telephone in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So it was impossible that that I had heard something. And he was stunned because the call had just gone through, it hadn't rung yet, and here I am just saying his name. So I actually calculated the odds that something like that would happen, and it's in the billions to one. So things like that seem to be Easter eggs. They seem to be evidence or examples of there's something behind all of this. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's programmed.
Right.
There is some evidence on the programming side as well, and be glad to get into that whenever you're ready.
Yeah. I mean, because what you described there is kind of what people would perceive at the first level at least as kind of a psychic ability, basically, and that.
Right.
But I mean, that also opens up a very interesting door in that sense that things that we have perceived as magic, other paranormal abilities or whatnot could possibly be either a glitch in the matrix, so to speak, or that we actually potentially at some times access other levels of the programming. Or what would you say that it is?
Well, exactly. I mean, you touched on a couple things there that are right on, I think. One of the things that I've thought about is, are you familiar with World of Warcraft, the role-playing game?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. When people play that, I have some friends who have guilds, and what they do is they talk to each other. They put headsets on, and they talk to each other through another mechanism, not through the program, but through what you might refer to as an out-of-band mechanism. It's another, it might be IP-based.
Like Skype or something like that.
Skype, yeah, something like that.
Right.
So what they're doing there is they're having some sort of out-of-band communication. Well, to people who might not be aware of that, who are also playing the game, they would be sort of astonished at the way the certain characters seem to know what each other is doing. Now, they're doing that because it's an intentional thing, but I could also imagine that there might be some sort of unintentional mechanisms where you get hints of things that are going on that can be done